Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fantasy Cricket Podcast. It's been a little bit erratic due to moving-related issues and time difference-related issues, but the exciting news for everyone is we've got a couple of semis, Asa.
Yeah, it's a semi, and it's looking promising. Let's see how it plays out with regards to the pitch and the balls.
Yeah, I mean, you got to make sure that the playing surface is up to mark.
Yeah.
But unfortunately,
Yeah.
with these semis, the toss plays an important role.
Yeah. It depends on if it's a hard wicket, to be honest.
Yeah. I think depends on the grass and the wicket as well.
That's true.
There's been a lot of talk coming into coming into this tournament, and then throughout the tournament about how there's been a big issue with how important the toss has been. It's really affecting games. It's affected the outcome of a lot of matches. People are perhaps correct in asking, in the T20 format, should the toss play such a vital role? And I think before we dive into everything, that's the first point. Is it's almost a guaranteed, right? Win the toss.
So win toss, win match, bowl first, all of those things. It's really tricky because you're having a competition in the UAE when it's getting a little bit cooler in the evenings. The dew plays a big part. Wickets are deteriorating. You're right. So with that said, I think the semifinals offer a better opportunity because a lot of the matches have been one-sided regardless of the toss. But with the semifinals, at least you have very solid teams competing against each other, coming into the sort of knockout phase at their peaks. I'd say England are sort of unlucky in that one because even if they are at their peak, they've lost a couple of players. But Pakistan and England have genuinely been the standout teams of the competition so far. New Zealand has been, as ever, the silent assassins, and Australia. Well, look, you would feel like they're lucky to be there, but they sort of haven't hit their peak yet. They're just hitting into their stride. So it's a very interesting set of matches that are coming up, Nick.
Yeah, it's. I mean, let's dive into it, right? Let's start with the first semi-final, which will be, at the time of recording, it will be tomorrow, between England and New Zealand playing at Abu Dhabi. The big team news, as you alluded to just now, is that Jason Roy is out for England, which is, I think in some ways it's a massive blow because he's been in good form this tournament. He's a really good aggressive player at the top. But also, I think this England team showed, particularly over the summer where they had that COVID crisis, that they have the ability to slot in replacements. I personally think Bairstow moves up and opens, and Billings comes in for Roy and goes down a bit further down the order. But
the England squad is so strong that you remove Jason Roy, who's been one of the top scorers for them in this tournament, and yet they look like favorites coming into that match tomorrow. That's a testament to their squad and their attitude. Billings is going to probably play with the same intent that Roy was playing with. Young Johnny Bairstow also, really, it's strange that he doesn't open, in any other side in the world, he was slotted as an opener right away. But just because of Butler and Roy being the players that they are, he doesn't open. And there you go. Yep. You have him at the top. Doesn't look like a side for the worse, really, the English. So, well, very good for them. Tamal Mills, on the other hand, is also not available, but they seem to be fine with that. Chris Wokes has been a sort of renewed revelation for them in this tournament, so That's great. Leg spin in general in this tournament has been very effective. And Adil Rashid, of course, is one of the top exponents of that art. So he's looking promising. We can say probably the same for Ish Sodhi, who's been in imperious form, picking up wickets every match in the tournament. So he's looking good. And then you have, of course, Wood or Willie coming in as to fill in the final bowling slot.
I mean, I think that's probably the only worry, if any, is that last Seaver slot. I think Willie being fit is really, really important if he's fit, because he also tonks the ball when he's got the chance. But before we go into that, I just wanted to quickly talk about the last results. Sorry about that little hiccup, Azza. I had a dog that needed to leave the room, and I've lost my train of thought. Yes, no, I remember. I wanted to hit you with the fact that in the last game, England played where Roy got injured. They lost to South Africa, and you talk about momentum a lot in cricket. I want you to let me know whether you think that's a cause for concern, or whether it was just because England had lost the toss, they'd lost the game, and if Roy hadn't gone off injured, they only lost by about 10 runs, it would have been a lot closer.
Yeah, so it was firstly the toss, as you say. It's much harder to chase in those conditions. I think England also played to a formula of showing positive intent. They figured out with their analytics team that losing a wicket in T20 cricket is often beneficial if you do it in the right intervals. Now, that's going to win you more games than losing you games, but sometimes it will lose you games, especially when you're chasing in tough conditions, and you've also got one of your top batters in the top order injured. It is certainly going to lose you the game. So those 10 runs really is an analytical metric. So Owen Morgan likes to listen to his analytics team, his coaching staff, and they played to a formula. The formula, unfortunately, didn't factor in the injury, and hence they lost. That's my opinion of it. We saw Liam Livingstone going berserk at one point in the match, and I think that's also been factored into the formulae.
Well, I mean, all I know is there was, I think, on the BBC coverage, Andy Zaltzman came out with a stat, which was no team has ever won the T20 World Cup being undefeated. So, maybe that bodes well for England. There might be cause for concern for Pakistan. We can chat about that a bit later on when we get to the Australia-Pakistan preview. There's the last time England played New Zealand in an ICC event, it was a very clear one-sided winner in an obvious a game where it was obvious that there was one clear better team, and
it was clearly a one-sided competition.
Yeah. But New Zealand have changed a lot since then. They've got I think they've got about 3 or 4 players who are really come out of nowhere. I mean, the likes of Devon Conway, Daryl Mitchell. These are players that were not talked about, at least as far as I knew, in 2019. But there's some big players that are performing super well. They're looking good. So, what are your thoughts on this New Zealand side? I think as far as team news is concerned, Milner's come in for Adam Milne's come in for Lockie Ferguson, and he's slotted in beautifully. He's doing well. Any opinion on this New Zealand squad?
So just on your first point of players coming out of nowhere, a lot of these players, if you were part of the New Zealand first class setup, you'd be quite well aware of, but New Zealand took their time in picking them for their international teams. Now, what's interesting about this New Zealand side for this World Cup is that they have gone for very specialist limited overs players, whereas traditionally New Zealand have liked to stick with their international players across formats. I feel like thanks to franchise cricket around the world, they've got a bounty of good limited overs players now, and they have a good system to sort of nurture them and bring them into their international setup anyway. What's been a true revelation for them, sorry, just one sec, just before I finish, is Mitchell Santner and Ish Sodhi. Now they've been around for a long time, but they've sort of found a metronomical ability to pick up wickets and be economical, and that's really important.
Yeah,
yes, what you want to say?
I wanted to say something on your point about across format players. I think that was really seen in their last game against Afghanistan. I mean, they won with 11 balls to spare, with Williamson scoring 40 at a strike rate of 95 and Conway scoring 36 at a strike rate of 112 because they could afford to score slowly. And I think that therein lies the New Zealand approach to cricket. I think they're a very adaptable team, whereas England is very much a single-minded approach. New Zealand are very good at adapting their game to the scenario. They're happy to score 40 runs at 95, whereas in an England setup, that's sacrilegious. You can't do that. You cannot afford to do that. And on the point of Santner and Sodhi, I think you're right. They've really come into their own. Ish Sodhi in particular, he's been flirting with the number one ranking for a while now, I think, as in limited overs cricket, along with the likes of Adil Rashid, Rashid Khan, Shamsi from South Africa. So he's been bowling well. What about from a fantasy point of view, Asa? We haven't touched upon that yet. We are a fantasy cricket podcast.
Yeah.
Are there any individuals from either side? So let's start with New Zealand. That you really look at and say that these are picks that I want in my fantasy squad.
Martin Guptill. Let's start with him. Just a few quick barrage of stats. He's averaged 53 or 54 points in the last 5 matches, fantasy wise. That's terrific. He's averaging about 28 runs per innings in Abu Dhabi, and a great strike rate as well. Now he's looking in good touch, so I'd pick him. He's also sort of on the sort of lower end of the credit spectrum. He's 9 credits. Now it's a big game, big players from England, big players from New Zealand. So 9 credits gets you a long way with someone like Martin Guptill. Then you of course have the big names. You have your sort of Kane Williamsons, Devon Conway, Trent Bolt, Ish Sodhi, who we just discussed. Now from those, Ish Sodhi, again, 9 credits, lower than your average expected credits. Devon Conway, 9 credits. Daryl Mitchell, 8.5 credits. Now, these are good buys for cheap credits. Trent Bolt is a great buy, but he's 9.5 credits. But I'd say in a sort of solid 11, you have to pick him. Kane Williamson, unfortunately, for me, would not be picked in all scenarios. In the last 5 matches, he's been averaging about 33 fantasy points, which is I'd say not optimal for a big match like this where you have English players as well who can give you a lot of points. So that's really it from my perspective, from the New Zealand point of view. If you have something to add.
No, not really. I mean, I agree with most of those. I think your point about Trent Bolt is a really valid one. I think history has shown us that he, in the IPL in particular, has always shown up in the big games. He gets those early wickets, and you kind of fancy him to this England's batting approach. They're going to want to be swinging hard, and you fancy him to get wickets coming into those right-handers.
Yeah, and just looking at his bowling performances from the last 4 matches, 3 for 17 against Afghanistan, 2 for 20 Namibia, 2 for 29 Scotland, and 3 for 20 India. He's on a high.
He's on a high. He's taking wickets. He likes bowling in the UAE. So there's no doubt about that. And his last game was 2 days ago in Abu Dhabi, where he picked up those 3 wickets. So it's important to consider that. As a England, I don't think we need to touch upon England too much because we've discussed English T20 cricket almost to death at this point on this podcast, at least in the last couple of weeks.
And so is every other podcast.
So as well. I mean, I think you sort of have to. Just give me some numbers on Adil Rashid if you've got any, because I think Butler, Moeen, and Livingston are 3 big obvious names. But what's your opinion on Adil Rashid? Are you picking him from the England squad, or are you just saying we've got Ish Sodhi who's been doing well, no need to pick Rashid? Or do you want to pick both?
So a few things about Adil. He's averaging 50 points in general in the last 5 matches. Now, that's been skewed a bit because of his incredible performance against the West Indies at the start of the tournament, where he picked up 4 wickets for 2 runs, which you wouldn't expect him to get in every match, honestly. If he was, it'd be like a video game, and we're all just NPCs in Adil's world at that point. But that's still very solid. Also, he's only worth 9 credits. So again, to allow you to pick someone like Joss Butler in your team, who's worth 10.5 credits, or someone like Johnny Bairstow, who's worth 9.5 credits, you need to pick the likes of Adil Rashid. And now, just going to quickly touch upon even Moeen Ali, who's only worth 9 credits again. These are good buys.
Only worth 9? That's I mean, 9 credits for Moeen Ali seems like a bit of a steal.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think honestly, as this is looking like it's gonna be a good game. It's gonna be a good matchup.
Yeah.
First time these teams are meeting in an ICC event since that infamous final, the greatest day of my life. But that's just one of our 2 semis. It's time to address the second one.
That was your semi. Now let's get to mine.
Yeah, well, it's. The thought of a semi with Australians is just frightening. Let's jump into this game. It's Australia versus Pakistan. It's being played in Dubai. Not that particularly matters, given that every ground seems to be pretty similar in terms of win toss, bowl first philosophy. However, this is what I wanted to say earlier when I mentioned the Zaltzman stat about no team has won the T20 World Cup. Apparently, if I'm remembering it correctly, without dropping at least one game. Pakistan have yet to drop a game, but that's against the Pakistan buff, which is the UAE buff. I think they're now won something like 15 or 16 games in a row in the UAE. 16 games. I mean, they're coming in like a freight train.
Yeah.
And I think
it's pretty much their home. It's India's home World Cup, but it feels more like Pakistan's home World Cup. I don't want to say anything else about that because I might stir some sentiments. But that's just the truth, honestly, I would not expect Australia to get very far against this Pakistani team. But then Pakistan cricket has this incredible ability to entertain and surprise us. And that can work both ways. So let's see what they turn up with regards to surprises in store for us. But if we expect them to perform the way they have been, well, they have a lot of players, and we're kind of spoiled for choice, really, on who to name here, who to discuss, and who to name.
Well, I want to start off with David Warner. I mean,
right, you're going for Australia.
I'm going to go for Australia. He's in when he's not punching people in pubs, he can actually play a bit of cricket. And he's done a pretty decent job in the last game. I mean, he scored 89 striking at 158, and I think he's due big runs, but he's always been a player that once he gets a bit of form, he really kicks off. I think Warner, Finch at the top versus Shaheen Shah Afridi is going to be a really exciting prospect again. Similar to how Bolt is that early wicket asset for New Zealand. I think Shaheen Shai Afridi is very much in that mold as well. And I kind of see both. I don't want to keep comparing, going back to England, but I see Australia almost as a poor man's England in terms of how they set up the balance of their squad, in terms of their sort of options and sort of approaches to cricket. You've got the Malan Smith comparisons. You've got the Warner, Roy, Finch, Butler kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Maxwell, Owen. It's sort of like that. But I think Warner's really worth looking at for Australia. I think Mitch Marsh had a good performance last time, but I think the other Australian player that has to be looked at is young Joshy Hazelwood.
Yeah, Josh Hazelwood. Let's quickly touch on some fantasy elements here. Only worth 8.5 credits. Again, I feel like that's a great deal.
That's a steal.
It's a steal.
I don't think you can say steal when you're referring to Australians because they think about their great-great-grandfathers or whatever it is.
Yeah, also when you mentioned a poor man's England, that's literally what Australia is.
I mean, it is, right? It's not necessarily a poor man's England, it's certainly a convict's England, but
Yeah, true. Again, we're stirring sentiments. Let's get back. We've already stirred the sentiment. At this point, no Australian is going to be happy to listen to us.
I mean, all one Australian that exists probably that actually listens to this, but
Yeah.
Maybe that's the play, Azza. There's no such thing as bad publicity.
True. But quickly to touch on Josh Hazelwood, 280 points in this tournament, very, very solid performance. So we're basically looking at 50 plus points per match. That's solid. He's only second to Adam Zampa in that Australian team for fantasy points and for bowlers performances. Now Adam Zampa, again, like other great leg spinners or wrist spinners, should I say, around the world, seems to be thriving in these conditions. Interesting that India didn't really have good leg spinning options coming into this tournament. Now that I think of it, they went back to Ashwin and Jadeja in the exact time when they might have needed someone like Yuzi Chahal. But sorry to bring up India. It's just my India-centric sort of view on everything, as yours is England. But Adam Zampa, getting back to the point, Grant Maxwell has not really exploded yet in the tournament, which might be a point for concern for Australia.
Yeah, I mean you'd like him to explode in a semi. At least coming into this tournament, he had a few. I think in the warm up games, he had some good form. He had some good form for Bangalore. But you're right. I mean, look, listen. I think Maxwell's a cracking player, but I think when you talk about explosive performances, I'm going to completely change the topic and jump into Shai Malik.
Yeah, man. I was going to mention him because he has played across 4 decades now. Not to say that he's played for 4 decades, but he's played in 4 different decades. It's crazy, but he likes to keep himself fit. You can see that at his age, he's still supremely fit, and he's got an ability to score big shots, hit the big shots when it matters. Very similar to, say, Asif Ali as well. These guys really are what Pakistan have done really well, Nick, in my opinion, is that they've got Babar Azam and Mohammad Rizwan as their anchor roles. Now, they're great anchor roles to have because they're scoring at better strike rates than most anchor roles around the world with the expected high averages. And then around them, they've got these big hitters, Shoaib Malik, Asif Ali. These guys, Fakhar Zaman as well, can do a bit of both. He can be an anchor and he can be a big hitter, or he can be both at the same time. Now, that's what's making this Pakistan team so scary to look at, because they've got the bowling chops that they've already had. that they've always had, but probably one of the strongest, probably after England, the strongest batting core coming into the semis.
I'm just looking at the numbers. Shai Malik scored 54 off 18 balls at 300 in the last game.
Yeah,
I mean, granted it was Scotland, but that is demoralizing stuff. I mean, if you're that Australian bowling lineup and this guy walks in with some pretty big dick energy, you're gonna think that this guy means business.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming into a semi with big dick energy, so that's all there's to say about that.
That's all there is to say. Any other players in particular that from either side that you want to mention, just briefly from sort of a fantasy point of view?
From a fantasy point of view, I wanted to say a couple of things about how expensive a few players are versus how not expensive some others are. As I have done so far in this episode, Babar Azam and David Warner both cost 10 credits, and you would probably want to have both of them in your team, whatever the nature of the competition you're selecting, which means that ideally you're going to have to select a lot of lower credit players to make up for that expense right at the start. So I'm not sure if you want to select Glenn Maxwell because he's 9.5 credits coming on not a great high. So you might want to go for Shadab Khan, Mitch Marsh, Mohammad Hafiz if he plays. These guys are 8.5 to 9 credits, good all-round options. Now, all bowlers, or rather no bowler, costs more than 9 credits, which is also good news. Haris Rauf, Adam Zampa, Shaheen Afridi, all of them 9 credits. Joshie Hazelwood, who you mentioned right at the start, 8.5 credits, as we already mentioned. Lastly, wicketkeeper, Mohammad Rizwan, 9.5 credits. As I said, Rizwan and Babar Azam are who Pakistan like to build their core around, and you can expect him to get you a solid chunk of points.
Yeah, and I think that having a wicketkeeper who opens the batting is just much better, isn't it, from a fantasy point of view?
Exactly.
There's no guarantee when the wicketkeeper comes in at Matty Wade, I think, comes in at 7, something like that. It's a bit of a scenario. Had a few of those in my time. I wanna just quickly transition, just as we sort of wrap up this podcast. Let's start with England, New Zealand. Give me a matchup that you're looking forward to from a cricket point of view, and maybe a prediction as to what the results could be.
Results. Firstly, I think England's gonna come out on top. I say that also as an Indian cricket fan who's just been so undone by New Zealand cricket in the last few years that my heart wants, for the first time ever in my life, England to actually trump anyone else. Sorry to hurt your sentiments there, Nick, but that's just the truth. That's my sort of big one. In terms of matchups, I'm looking at Ish Sodhi versus any batsman, really. That's what I'm interested in. And seeing how he gets on against a very informed England batting lineup. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be one of the tighter games that we'll have this tournament. I'm really looking forward to Satner versus Liam Livingstone. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. Interesting to watch. And then from an Australia-Pakistan point of view, I think Pakistan are the favourite. I see Pakistan winning. I have a massive respect for what they've done this tournament, but I'm almost at a point where if England do make a final, just the idea of an England-Australia final is always exciting, and having suffered a big loss to Pakistan as India being my second team, I don't know if I could do it in the final to to have England lose to Pakistan. But I could be wrong. England may not make it anyway, so it could be an Anzac final as well, for all we know. But I'm really, really looking forward to Shaheen Shah Afridi against David Warner. I think that's going to be shades of Mitchell Starc at the 2015 World Cup.
Yeah, that's what Shine's been bringing to the table this tournament. Shades of Mitchell Starc.
Any thoughts, Azza, on that game, on the Australia-Pakistan result and matchups?
No, I agree with you completely about Pakistan looking like absolute favorites here. You're right. And Australia would really have to play out of their skins and be lucky. And Pakistan would have to pull a Pakistan for it to go against them, really.
Yep. No, I think that says it all, really. We're back. We're trying to sort of change our focus a little bit and make it a bit more accessible to people. So if anybody does have thoughts or comments or any feedback, if you can share, support us in any way. We do this for fun, but we would like to grow our platform a little bit. We'll hopefully be joining you guys for a final. We're going to preview the final as well. So just keep listening. And any other closing remarks, Azza?
No, I think we're good to go, Nick.
Well, all that's left is that smile and satisfaction when you've finally dealt with your semis. Azza, on that note, thank you very much for joining me today at an ungodly hour in the UK, and we'll catch up on Saturday for the World Cup final preview.
Thanks, Nick.
Cheers.